I'm about to attempt to read 30 books in 10 days. Question 1. Why? Because my New Year's resolution this year was to read 60 books, and right now I've only read 30. Question 2. When? The challenge starts today on the 21st of December and ends at midnight on the 31st of December, excluding the 30th of December. Question 3. What are the rules? While books of any length are allowed, there are a few kinds of books that aren't. These include books I've already read before, picture books or wordless books, and books that I've already started reading. Books that are allowed, on the other hand, include plays, non-fiction books or essays, and comic books or mangas. With that being said, here are my books. I have 17 books in this pile, and then I have 10 what they call Penguin Little Black Classics in this pile. Now you might be wondering, that's 3 books short of 30, and you would be correct, my friend. I realised while searching around my house that I didn't have enough small, finishable in one day books for this challenge. So here I am looking for some in my local bookshop. So, here are the 2 that I bought in my bookshop, plus I have this that I bought online because I've been wanting to read this for a long time. Let's read. Progress report. We are 2 days into the challenge and I've read 5.5 books, which means I'm roughly on pace. It should be about 3 books a day. The first day I read The Lady in the Van, It Was Snowing Butterflies by Charles Dickens, and Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. And on the second day I read Albert Camus' A Happy Death, Catalys's I Hate and I Love, and about a fourth of Alan Bennett's Talking Heads. So to start with, I was already pretty familiar with The Lady in the Van story because I saw the movie that came out, I think, in 2016. So I basically knew where the story was going and who the characters were, but that didn't take away from my enjoyment because the main character, I would say the main character in this book, Mary Shepherd, who was played in the movie and the original play by Maggie Smith, is, in my opinion, one of the greatest characters ever put to stage, put to screen, whatever. Like, Of Mice and Men was so good. John Steinbeck does such a good job of creating these, like, emotional, deep, rich connections between characters. And his ability to create this just visceral vibe of this, like, agricultural America and this sort of ebbing tragedy with, like, what I think was less than 100 pages, maybe? A bit more. But yeah, I was reading this book at, like, 5 in the morning, no sleep for about 15 hours, but I was hooked till the end. It Was Snowing Butterflies by Charles Darwin, on the other hand, was an absolute sludge to get through. I don't know what I expected from Charles Darwin, because it's not really a literary text, it's more just a series of diary entries from his journey on the Beagle that are less interesting and more just recorded facts and figures. Now, if you know me personally, you know I'm a big Camus fan, which I know immediately creates this image of me as this, like, pretentious Instagram Reddit philosopher who has to impose absurdism on everyone, but I promise I'm not. But yeah, The Myth of Sisyphus did admittedly change my life when I read it as an angsty 13-year-old. And so did Camus' The Stranger when I read it a few years later. From what I can tell from the blurb, I think this is one of Camus' earlier literary works, and I can see that. The writing is less refined and less subtle, and you can sort of see the gears philosophically turning in the author's mind. But that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it. I think I probably enjoyed it actually more than The Stranger, because this book was just way more sort of expressive in its emotional and philosophical angst. And also, unlike The Stranger, which is sort of I would say maybe monotonous or like glum almost. This had a real sense of awe and serenity and an admiration of the beauty of nature and the beauty of our place in the universe. I don't have much to say about the next book I read, Catalyst's I Hate to Love. It's just sort of a bunch of poems from this guy who is simping for this random Greek woman. So 2 days in, how am I feeling about this challenge? Well, there are a few things I realised. Firstly, that books that I don't want to read, books that I just don't want to get through, I'm going to have to get through. Which happened for the Charles Darwin book. I was just like, I do not want to read the rest of it, but I need to for this number count. But on the flip side of that, books that I want to sit with more, books that I just want to relish, I'm not going to be able to. Because as soon as I've read a book, I need to move on to the next one. Like, there are some descriptions in this Albert Camus book that I was just like, oh, I wish I could just sleep on them for a night, just like sit on them and think about them. But I had to move on, you know? And also, this challenge is for sure going to destroy my sleep schedule. It's like 5 in the morning on the 23rd, and I'm filming this. So, I guess, am I confident for the coming 8 days? Yeah.
And though England is mine, I must leave it all behind. The war is over, lift the anchors, set an open course for New York state lines. I think of all that went wrong. The sailor boys light up in song and they sing of London. Love they made there, will it really last? Anytime. What's that you said to me? Oh, I'm a chaos space marine, so what? I love you, darling, will you take my metal hand? It's cold, in time you will find these things take up space inside your mind, where you could be keeping honest thoughts of the sea alone. So I'm leaving this body, and I'm never coming home again, yeah. I'll bury the action between the window and the kingdom of Ben. I'm becoming a world now, and I'm looking for a place to live, yeah.
Day 5 update. So on day 3 I read 3 Batman comic books. I read Batman Court of Owls, Batman City of Owls, and Batman Night of the Owls. I also finished reading and watching as well Alan Bennett's Talking Heads. Day 4 I read Jane Austen's The Beautiful Cassandra and Meiko Kawakami's Miss Ice Sandwich. And on day 5 I read The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, Sun Tzu's The Art of War, and Sappho's Come Close. I'm filming. I'm going to try and keep these reviews short for the Batman comics. I'm not a big comic book fan, but I really like the first 2 I read, The Court of the Owls and The City of Owls, and this one not so much, but it's not really a proper comic anyway. I really like Talking Heads, and I'm starting to appreciate Alan Bennett's ability to just write these lonely, melancholic, but also sort of funny, British, old, lonely people. Jane Austen's The Beautiful Cassandra was so forgettable. I literally cannot remember a single thing about it already. As a fan of the stuff I've previously read from Kawakami, Miss Ice Sandwich is like a continuation of her ability to just write adolescence and write coming of age and the sort of rawness that entails like no other author I've ever read before. Curious Incident just really angered me and pissed me off, because both of these books here that I'm holding up have sort of autistic or neurodivergent main characters, but whereas Miss Ice Sandwich is tender and subtle and treats it like a real sort of part of life, The Curious Incident felt like it was disrespecting the character's neurodivergency, treating it like a sort of Deadpool-esque fourth wall breaking literary gimmick, which I wasn't a fan of at all. I don't have much to say about Sun Tzu's The Art of War. I mean, obviously you can tell he's a wise man and a good military general, but also I just saw no point in reading this book. Like, when am I ever going to use this advice on how to ration my army's food? Like, it just felt pointless reading it. It wasn't bad,
Why?
And Sappho's Come Close was really nice. The blurb of this book says, sensual, sun-soaked verse. And I really agree with that description. In terms of overall thoughts so far in this challenge, I'm pretty on track books-wise, but I'm not too confident that they'll keep on going because I have a lot of stuff lined up in the next few days. I'm also starting to burn out reading-wise. I'm spending a majority of my time that isn't eating, sleeping, or doing things that I cannot physically be reading during reading. And that sensation of having just finished reading a book and having to immediately move on to the next one is one that I'm starting to really not enjoy. But I've also read some bangers, and I am expanding my reading range because I never really had the opportunity to read many comic books before, or translated literature before, or ancient literature before, or poetry collections before, or short story collections before, and this challenge has exposed me to a lot of that stuff, and it'll keep happening. Like, I'm reading a manga tomorrow, which I've never done before. So yeah, with that being said, 5 days left of the challenge. Let's go.
And if we're on a burning starship, the escape pods filled with your friends, your childhood film photos, there's no room for me to go. Oh, I'd wait there, float with the wreckage, fashion a long sword, traverse the Milky Way, trying to get home to you. And you bring some piece of the stars. I'll be there once more. I'm scared of the phone. Don't ring it. Please know that I'm just trying to find some way to keep me in your mind. And later on, everyone will say it was cool.
Okay, so I'm filming this at the end of day 9 of the challenge. As you might be able to see, it's just absolutely cluttered with books everywhere. I have technically 2 days left of the month, the 30th and the 31st, but I only have 1 day left of the challenge because tomorrow on the 30th my whole day is occupied. I've so far read 25 books, which means I need to read 5 books in 1 day on the 31st before New Year. I've been pretty tired out by this challenge. I've been reading up to 5 AM to 6 AM most days, but there's only 1 day left, so I'm just gonna have to lock in and hope I can get the challenge done.
Everyone will say it was cool. Oh, she had really iron style. Moving to Berlin for a little while, trying to find something to hold on to. Never touching nothing, but she won't tell me she's not that hard to find. And message me if you change your mind, darling. I'll be fine.
So the challenge is over. Today's the 3rd of January. The challenge ended at midnight on the 31st of December. And to list off the books I've read since we last spoke on Christmas: The Cherry Orchard, Time's Arrow, Wailing Ghost, Pretend You're in Tokyo, The Nightingales Are Drunk, Blue Lock Volume 1, The Council of Animals, Spacemen of Bohemia, On Violence, The Night is Darkening Around Me, Straight Line Crazy, Small Things Like These, How Much Land Does a Man Need, And Then There Were None, Mrs. Rosie and the Priest, and Human Acts. Which brings the grand total of books I read in 10 days to 29 out of 30. Which means I failed. I failed the challenge. I was this close. I was so close. It was just one more book. But I failed. But before I get to how I feel about being a complete failure, let me give you a summary of the books I read. And instead of reviewing every single book in this frankly enormous pile of books, let me give you my 5 favourite and 5 least favourite books of the challenge that I read in these 10 days. Okay, so starting with least favourite. Number 5, The Beautiful Cassandra by Jane Austen, which was so boring that I immediately forgot what I read the second I closed the book. Number 4, I Hate and I Love by Catullus, which was inappropriate and bawdy, not in a sort of fablio, tongue-in-cheek, satirical way like Chaucer is, but in the way that a Reddit incel misogynist is. Number 3, it was Snowing Butterflies by Charles Darwin, which was the book that I probably objectively enjoyed reading the least. It just gave such an utterly boring and scientific and mathematical account of what should have been, or what was, one of the most important and exciting expeditions in the whole of human history. It's at 3 instead of 2 or 1 because I understand, it is a bunch of diary entries. It was never meant to be, read or published, I don't think. And also, he's a scientist. He's not writing this book to be gripping. He's writing it as a list of observations. So fair enough, it's not harmful in any way. It's not, offensively bad. It's just really utterly dull. On the other hand, the 2 and 1 spot on this list are, in my opinion, actually harmful pieces of literature. At number 2, I have The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which, as I've already said earlier in the video, treats the main character's neurodivergency as essentially a gimmick, and therefore taking away all the potential tenderness or nuance or even empathy from this character's autism. And at number 1, we have Hannah Ardent's On Violence, which, apart from being a bunch of dense, pretentious, academic, intellectual slop that was almost impossible to get through and almost impossible to understand, was also racist, I think. I don't know if I misinterpreted her point because of the aforementioned impossible to read academic slop that is her writing, but I'm pretty sure that she argues at some point in the book that black students were misusing their power by demanding for subjects like African literature, which is just an L take. Okay, now onto my favourites. Before I give a top 5, here are some honourable mentions. Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. As always with Claire Keegan, I'm a big fan of Claire Keegan. I just love the way she writes. As Hilary Mantel says on the cover of this book, she does not waste a single word. She writes in such a soft and simple and understandable and subtle way, but also manages to hold so much emotional weight in her prose. Also, an honourable mention to The Council of Animals by Nick MacDonald. I really enjoyed this whimsical, tongue-in-cheek, almost Aesop's fable, fairy tale-esque take on the human apocalypse. Basically, the concept of the book is a bunch of animals assemble in this animal Houses of Parliament to try and assess or vote on whether the last remaining humans should be killed. Yeah, I thought it was really funny. There's this one character, the bear, who just starts quoting Shakespeare randomly, and it was maybe the only time I laughed this whole challenge. Other honourable mentions would go to A Happy Death by Albert Camus, Miss Ice Sandwich by Meiko Kawakami, Talking Heads by Alan Bennett, Come Close by Sappho, and Batman, The Court of Owls. Okay, now onto my top 5. At 5, we have The Spaceman of Bohemia by Jaroslav Kalfar. My favourite genre, or I guess micro-genre of book, is just sci-fi that is thinly veiled philosophy. And this is such a good example of that. It's about an astronaut who goes to space and meets this alien spider thing. There's a movie about it starring Adam Sandler. But really, more than the plot and the big space alien therapist spider, is questions about our place in the universe, our place on Earth, how we should truly be living life, all the good fundamental philosophical questions. At number 4, I would put Martin Amos's Time's Arrow. This is a really creatively told book that really made me rethink literature and rethink time. It's basically a life told backwards from the moment a man dies to the start of his life. There are a lot of twists and turns that you discover about this man's life as you go backwards through his timeline that I won't spoil now, but I will say hit me like a brick when I got to them. And in general, this book does what I guess all literature strives to, or should strive to do, which is makes you completely reevaluate and re-perspectivize your life. At number 3, I have Alan Bennett's The Lady in the Van. Now look, I understand completely that I am massively overrating this play, but other than just loving the way that Alan Bennett writes this character, I just couldn't divorce this character from Maggie Smith's performance, which I have seen, which was one of the greatest performances I have ever seen, and Maggie Smith is one of my acting heroes. So just reading this play script and imagining Maggie Smith delivering these lines on stage is the reason why I'm rating this so highly. At number 2, I have Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. This was the penultimate book I read for the challenge, my 28th book. And I mean, what can I say about this that hasn't been said? It is annoyingly perfect. Like, Agatha Christie just perfected the murder mystery. It is like almost boring how much of a 5-star book this is. Like, it is just a perfect, rounded off piece of literature. And at number 1, we have one of the first books I read, Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. This is essentially my introduction to John Steinbeck. I've read some of his short stories before, and I don't know how his style in Of Mice and Men would translate to his longer epics like The Grapes of Wrath or East of Eden, but the precision and the economic perfectness that he manages to capture in this really short novel is nothing short of genius. The fact that he builds such a vivid image of the time that this takes place, the setting that this takes place, makes you care so deeply for the two main characters and the other characters in the novel, is so impressive given that it's 100 pages or so. Okay, now we reach the pretentious conclusion part of the video. I spent 10 days trying to read 30 books, and I didn't manage to complete the challenge, only reading 29. So, was it worth it? On one hand, no. Firstly, the challenge completely ruined what was already a terrible sleep schedule. Secondly, while there were a few good books that I couldn't put down, there were an equal number of terrible books that I was obligated to read and finish that I didn't want to, which is a method of book consumption which I would not recommend. Thirdly, the fact that I had to essentially force-feed myself this literature really lowered my enthusiasm for reading by the end of the challenge. And as I said in my Day 5 summary, the idea of picking up that next book after just having read one really started to drain me mentally. And finally, as previously mentioned, I didn't actually complete the challenge, which you may be able to imagine really lowered my morale going into 2025. On the other hand, maybe it was worth it. Not to get deep, but I think literature as a medium and reading as an act is, in my opinion, one of the, if not the most immersive form that entertainment can take. Because unlike other forms of entertainment like cinema or music, which can be consumed passively or in the background, I think that books can only truly be consumed when your mind is fully committed to the words on the page and to the vision that the author is presenting. There are things like being able to empathize with a first-person narrator, or the physical relationship you have with the medium of the book and turning the page, and the idea of your imagination building the world that the words are describing. These are things that are unique to the reading experience and are why reading and books are so powerful and are still relevant and worth doing. Am I making sense? I'm not going to go too deep into it, but 2024 was a pretty bad year for me. And as Jesse says in Before Sunrise,
I became pretty sick of myself by the end of it. So I guess it was nice to end the year spending my days and nights transporting myself to worlds where I don't exist. Whether that be the sweltering post-depression California of Steinbeck, the flimsy spaceship inhabited by a Czech spaceman and his alien spider friend, Agatha Christie's murderous island mansion, or the Squid Game-esque football boot camp of Blue Lock. This challenge allowed me to temporarily escape from my own reality, instead dedicating my focus on reading books and forcing myself to get lost in them. Which all in all was exactly what I needed, and at the exact time I needed it too. So I guess, would I do it again? No.